practice community.
So I'm so happy that you're all here. Thank you so much for coming. And we're going to be talking today about imposter syndrome and how to overcome imposter syndrome. So before we get started, you guys all know me. I'm Alex, the creator of the Mindful practice and Sober Girls Yoga. I'm really, really happy that you are here and sharing this conversation. Okay, so what is imposter syndrome? Does anyone know what imposter syndrome is or want to share? Cool. Okay, so Linda and Saloni, both great answers, super similar to this. It's like the feeling that everyone else knows what they're doing, and you have this fear that the people around you are going to figure out that you don't know what you're talking about and expose you as a fraud. It's like basically this idea that you're a phony or you don't deserve to be doing what you're doing, even if you have like all the qualifications, all the schooling, all of the things to back you up. And I definitely know there's been many times in my life when I felt this way about myself, not always related to yoga. Like I can remember when I got my first job when I was 23 as a grade 3 teacher. For like the whole first year, I felt like I was a fraud and I like didn't deserve to be there and would like get super anxious and panicked and stressed that I just like wasn't qualified enough and didn't belong amongst all the other teachers at the school, even though I like later found out that there were like a lot of people on the staff that like were not qualified teachers. And I like literally had like a Bachelor of Education and a Bachelor of Arts. And so I was like more qualified than like even my team leader was like a chef. So like I had more qualifications than him, yet I had this fear that I wasn't good enough. And that's what imposter syndrome is. It's like feeling that you aren't qualified enough, even though when you definitely are. Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, really common. 7 out of 10 adults experience it at some point in their lives. And it's probably even more. I Googled this today, how common is imposter syndrome? Because I was like looking for some statistics, and I read one statistic that said like in different surveys, anywhere from like 20 to 80% of people. And I was like, oh, it's kind of weird. That's like not a very convincing statistic, so I won't put it in the presentation. But it lines up with what you said exactly a moment ago, Saloni, is that it just depends on what people identify this experience as. So they might not call it imposter syndrome per se, but it's like a self-doubt or not believing in yourself that kind of hinders your ability to move forward. And there are a ton of celebrities that have had imposter syndrome. I just chose a couple of my favorites because otherwise we'd be here for like an hour with me showing all of them. But Albert Einstein, he said, the exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. Tom Hanks, no matter what we've done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here? When are they going to discover that I am in fact a fraud and take everything away from me? And Emma Watson. So Emma Watson said, it's almost like the better I do, the more my feeling of inadequacy actually increases, because I'm just going, any moment, someone's going to find out that I'm a total fraud and that I don't deserve any of what I've achieved. So it's pretty fascinating when you see these people that we admire so much and just think are amazing, like Tom Hanks. I love Tom Hanks films, you know, Emma Watson and Harry Potter. Like these are like exceptional people, and to know that they've also felt these same feelings of inadequacy really puts it into I guess a bit of a perspective. Okay, so I want to share a little bit about my story with imposter syndrome. And there was just one well, there's not just one moment, but there was one experience that I was reflecting on when I was thinking about this workshop. And this was when I was about 100 days sober. I went and met one of my idols, who's Rolf Gates. And Saloni knows this story because she read about it in the book. I actually remember her being like, does this part really need to be in it? And I'm like, yes, it is the most important part. Um, but I went on this yoga teacher training, and at this point I had done my 200-hour yoga teacher training, my 300-hour yoga teacher training. I'd done a ton of workshops. I had taught probably over 1,000 yoga classes at this point, maybe like 1,500. I taught yoga in like Toronto, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi. Like I was like very experienced in yoga teaching. And I showed up on this training with Rolf Gates, which I basically only went on because I wanted to meet him. And it was like one of the most impactful weeks of my life. Like I took so much from it and incorporated it into my teaching now. And now I have a friendship with him, and he's, been on the podcast, and it's all been amazing. So it was like the best week ever. But anyway, when I arrived there, he asked us he was like, okay, the project this week is we have to choose an ordinary moment from our lives and turn it into like a Dharma talk, a yoga class, and then present on it at the end of the week. And I spent like the entire week just basically panicking, being like, I cannot do this. And I had a couple reasons why I couldn't do it. Reason one was that my life had not been ordinary because I had just gotten sober. So duh, like you cannot choose an ordinary task or an ordinary moment in that point in your life. And the second was that it just felt like everything was plagiarizing a page from a Rolf Gates book. And the reason why was because I had just read his book so many times that I had like passages memorized, and I was like, well, I basically can't do this project. Even though I probably had like a wealth of wisdom and knowledge within myself, I didn't feel like I was capable. And so he asked if anyone like had any questions for him like the night before the project. And I just like went up to him and burst into tears and was like, I can't do this project for like the reasons that I explained. And he was like, okay, you don't have to do it. And so then I left the class, and actually at the end of that day, Rob had played the harmonium for us, which is like, do you guys know the harmonium? It's like a little half keyboard, and there's like an accordion on the back. I used to have one when I lived in the UAE, and then it didn't make the move to Bali because it's like so heavy. But anyway, he played the harmonium, and then I was like going and popped and was chatting with one of my classmates and was talking about this harmonium and this whole thing of how I actually bought this harmonium in Dubai, and I drove like 2 hours to pick it up from some guy on like Craigslist, like it was Dubizzle, which is like the Craigslist of Dubai. And I had forgotten everything, like my money and everything. And I said to this guy, like, I don't have any way to pay you. I like didn't bring my wallet. And he literally just gave me this instrument and was like, well, I just trust that you're going to pay me for it, basically. And I was telling this story to my classmate, just being like, isn't that so amazing how he just like believed in this random stranger that they would just like do the right thing. And then I started reflecting on it and how the whole issue is like believing in ourselves and believing in others. And like the whole reason that I couldn't do this project was like not because I was 90 days sober, and it was not because it was plagiarizing a page from a Rolf Gates book. But the reason why I couldn't do this project was because I just didn't believe that I could, right? And then as soon as I realized that it was all about believing in myself, believing in other people, it was like I could just do the project like that. And I ended up doing a whole project around this theme of believing in yourself. And then the next day, Rolf said, oh, you're not doing the project right. I was like, no, I am. At the very end, and like went up and presented this whole thing. And then and at the end, he was like, well, it's a very tough act to follow. And it was just this huge kind of pivotal moment for me when I thought back on my life to all of these moments where like this wasn't the first time that this had ever happened. On my 200-hour yoga teacher training, I arrived in Mexico and I just like cried in the tent for like the whole week because I was like, I don't belong here. Like I would look around at all these people who were like, perfectly meditating and be like, I don't belong here, like I can't meditate like they can. Or the same thing happened on my advanced teacher training in Bali. Like I cried when they wanted us to teach using their cues, and I like cried because I was like, I can't do it. Like I don't know how to be like your style of yoga teacher, when in reality, like I had been teaching yoga for many years and like had the qualifications to do it. And this was kind of just this huge pivotal moment for me on understanding that the biggest thing holding me back was just like believing in myself. And so I want to share that with you and share with you some ideas of how we can overcome imposter syndrome. So I know that I said that there was a number one way and there was only one way, but as I was really working on this, I felt like there was a lot. It's a multifaceted thing that didn't have one name to it. But basically, what I think we need to do is something similar to what I did in the past with this whole reflection and realization, and then, doing this presentation on believing yourself. We just want to start to bring awareness and reflection and acceptance and compassion towards these feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt or imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call them. So we're going to do this today through a few things. We're going to do a little bit of journaling, a little bit of discussion, a little bit of meditation. How are we doing for time? Okay. And we have 17 minutes left. So I don't know how much of that we will do. We will fit into that 17 minutes. But okay, the first question I want to ask you is, how does this imposter syndrome or self-doubt or whatever you want to call it, how does it make you feel? So let's maybe just take a couple of minutes to journal on that. Okay, cool. I'm going to jump us forward to the next question. So, okay, I wanted to think about this, some of the failures that we've all had in our lives to get to where we are today. And the reason why I bring this up is not to make us feel more bad about ourselves. But the reason why I question was relevant is because I think sometimes we don't talk about all the failures that we have had in our lives. And then as a result, we don't think that other people have had failures. Like, we think that the most successful entrepreneurs have just stepped into it and it came naturally to them. And then they just stepped into like running their business, And for me, I would say, like, I'm pretty sure in the whole creation of the mindful life practice, I have failed many, many more times than I've succeeded. Like, I have failed at launching retreats, courses. Actually, I was supposed to be running a retreat this weekend. No one signed up for it in the UAE. And so there have been like failure after failure after failure in running this business. And I think sometimes that is not highlighted, and people look at me, for example, and be like, oh, she was just featured in like this magazine in the UK and just featured in this thing in the UAE and like has all these followers, right? And you would think that it just like was something that randomly just happened overnight, but it's just been like trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing and keep going. But we often don't hear that story or that narrative. So I think there's some value in us hearing about the failures that we've had and the resiliency that we've developed, and then realize that it's like a universal human experience. Because I think sometimes we internalize our failures and think that they mean like, I am a failure, when in reality it's like, oh, that retreat just didn't work. Oh, maybe I'm past I said to my friend today, he's like, oh, are you getting all geared up for your like Alain retreat weekend? And I was like, oh, no one signed up. And he's like, what? And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm like past my prime of like weekend retreats in Dubai, like maybe this is just like not this phase of my life, and that's okay. And I'm doing this like awesome Zoom thing instead. So anyway, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts. You don't have to share your failures, but any reflections on this idea of thinking about or reflecting on our failures. Okay, so we had one more journal prompt, which I might just leave everyone with, which is something that you can reflect on later, is what are some of the successes that you've had in your journey or career, specifically around the theme of like related to your imposter syndrome, which is what I was thinking about. Because like, for example, if you're struggling right now with like stepping into Like, I'll tell you, for me, I sometimes feel like an imposter in like the Ubud Bali yoga scene, because there's just like so many yoga teachers in Ubud and Bali, and I'm like, I'm not like as whatever as them. And I think thinking about your past successes, like for me, it's like all the yoga classes I've taught in other places and my online yoga community. And if there's a way that you can keep these top of mind and honor them, like if there's a way that you can save them, actually, we have a testimonials page on the Mindful Life Practice website, which we haven't updated in a long time, but I was looking at it the other day, and I think sometimes you forget how many like people you've impacted or touched. And so having those all organized on one page and just going back to it and me realizing like I actually have made an impact on people, even if at times, you know, you go through highs and lows when you're like, I don't really feel like I'm making an impact. And circling back to that. So that's cool having that little testimonials page, but you could even have like an email folder or like a little box specifically with these things that you can circle back to, because I think sometimes we just forget. Okay, the last thing that we were going to do was a self-compassion meditation, but there's so many types of meditations that you can find online, and I'll lead this. Maybe I'll do a recording and send it out because I don't want to keep you all over time. But a little meditation practice can be super beneficial as well. Amazing. So this, I personally think, is one of the biggest things that gets in the way of people from moving forward with their businesses. I've worked with so many different yoga teachers or just like amazing people over the years who have these brilliant ideas, might be really qualified, but it's because you don't believe in yourself that you don't get going. And this was my biggest thing with creating the whole Mindful Life practice. Actually, was I didn't think that I would be successful on my own. And so I held myself back for a really, really long time. But pretty much nothing will happen if you aren't able to like get over that hump and believe in yourself. So I do one-on-one coaching to help people in breaking through these blocks and obstacles. And also next week, I'm launching my next Entrepreneur Mastermind course, which I'm really excited about. It's the second time I'm running this, and it's a group program that's going to help you in all of these things. So discovering your purpose, creating a thriving business, giving the tools and techniques to implement it, and then just being in community with entrepreneurs like Jenny was talking about at the start of the session. So that is that. I'm going to stop my screen share. Does anyone have any last questions or thoughts or anything that they want to share before we wrap it up?